They gave us crusts, just trash designed to shame. But out of rust and ruin, mankind forged a warship so lethal that, in an instant, derision transformed into dread. Now, a galaxy trembles before a power born of scorn. Now, the overlooked human spirit has become an irresistible force of nature that collides with fear and awe of reshaping destiny. In a galaxy where grand empires glimmered with polish and power, humanity had become mere scavengers. A species was regarded only with ridicule and disdain. Across the star systems, alien aristocrats gossiped about our past failures, our primitivity, our inability to innovate. We were nothing more than a husk in the wind, echoing an existence long forgotten, and the rest in the surface layers barely doing enough to maintain viability amidst the detritus of long-history empires. Each council meeting, each diplomatic exchange, warranted the conviction that humanity's fate was sealed, until an unforeseen twist of fate would rend that conception in two forever. The turning point happened as a final, cruel joke played by our intergalactic benefactors, in what was clearly a gesture meant for humiliation. To remind us of our infinitesimal magnitude, the world was given a presented gift of a massive, decommissioned warship. What had once been one of the proud vessels of a powerful fleet was now reduced to rusted junk. Yet another reminder of our demise and a final snicker from the galactic monoliths. Intended as a diplomatic slight, the ship was delivered in what can only be described as disrepair, the hull which once epitomized majesty riddled with the scars of age and neglect. No one expected to find the embers of metamorphosis hidden behind its crumbling facade. For years, the scrap ship sat deserted in a shuttered dock above a dead world, its silence a requiem for the dreams of its new masters. But within secret hangars and obscure workshops, engineers kept working tirelessly. We applied ingenuity born out of desperation and the need to prove our worth, and we got working, stripping parts from derelict vessels and re-engineering obsolete technology. Each bolt tightened, each circuit reawakened was a silent challenge to the galaxy's plosive laughter. It was a relic that our engineers, under the guidance of only the most daring philosophers, had somehow turned into something so far out of paradigm, into a beacon of possibility and precursor of transformation. News of the resurrection rippled like wildfire through the interstellar network. Officials among the alien race that was once so smugly sure of human inferiority started to take note. The updated warship reemerged in the middle of an active war zone, and their initial amusement turned to incredulity. At first, enemy fleets mocked its battered silhouette. What could it be more than an easy target, an apparition from the past with no real danger? But then reports began to roll in. Instruments were picking up energy surges. Adaptive shields that broke all known laws of physics were being detected. Its engines, once dismissed as relics, suggested innovations that enabled the ship to glide with a grace and velocity that belied the dilapidated facade. The ship was no longer a discarded scrap of metal. It was an agent of change, an ace of spades that no one had counted on. And the diplomatic insult had since become a rallying cry for humanity. As alien commanders speculated its meaning in closed conference rooms, human voices started to chant in defiant harmony. Our engineers and pilots and strategists, all of us who had, until now, been left to die by a galaxy that had considered us expendable, had worked hard to breathe life into this wreck. Each adjustment, each enhancement was not only a technological feat, it was a statement. The vessel, which 2 decades earlier was slated to lose itself in obscurity, was, instead, set to redefine the balance of power. The stakes were monumental. If this reawakened relic were allowed to run amok, it could usher in a new world order, one in which humanity had finally become a force to be feared, breaking the centuries-old stranglehold of alien life. But should it ever be vanquished, then the flicker of rebellion and hope it stood for could be extinguished for all time, and our people shoved back into the abyss of servitude. In the darkened halls of our secret workshops, tension crossed swords with excitement. Engineers nervously eyed each other across blueprints, knowing each new breakthrough could become their downfall. The constant threat that what I had created might be discovered by a more advanced race hung over my head, as did the thought of retaliation by alien races. But that spirit of defiance moved us forward. It was all we had. proof that creativity and determination were superior to the enemy's most sophisticated technology, and we knew we had no choice but to succeed. But deep inside that cold spaceship, in the passage between burn and ignition, every rivet struck and system powered flamed with the possibility of rewriting our fate. The galaxy at large was in a state of uncertain indecision. Delegates from such empires gathered to weigh the new menace. The derisive mirth of alien operatives who once dismissed the notion with a quick scoff now turned to a furrowed brow of consideration and concern. So was this scrap heap warship really at the cutting edge of humanity's resurgence, or just an anomalous blip in humanity's 100,000-year run of war? In days to follow, the ship would determine if it sparked a revolution that would take humanity to heights we have yet to dream of, or if it had been snuffed out, securing humanity's place as the ultimate underdog in a cosmos of strength and privilege. So, as the old order clung to its hubris and the galaxy's outcasts readied themselves for an unsure future, it was time. What was once a mere mass of rusty shell had become the archetype of human determination and the starting point for a new world order roadmap. The galaxy at large caught our vibe. While the enemy were still clueless about the full extent of our secret, a pulse of its newly awakened engines was a promise of a rewritten fate cast in the fires of rejection and forged into a weapon of untold potential. The warship had once represented everything that made mankind small. Now it was an enigma that seemed to challenge every rule of the art of war as it was known. Its metamorphosis gave pause to the galaxy's ruling fleets. Feeling the threat, fleets from the greatest empires arrived at the edges of the conflict zone, their warships arrayed like a glimmering wall of defiance against the unknown. Confident that their high-tech weaponry and combat-tested tactics would prevail, commanders trained carefully for what they assumed would be a simple fight. But the moment the initial shots began to echo into the void, it became apparent they were facing an enemy too unconventional to list. Early investigations of the ship's defenses produced shocking findings. Launched against its adaptive shielding, conventional weaponry honed over centuries of interstellar combat was little more than a decoration. The hull of the ship, which had looked like nothing more than a hulk of rust and decay, appeared to absorb and dissipate energy in a way that was completely outside the known laws of physics. Assuming all that draped holonovels lay accurate in their workings to hindsight, the ship countered every attack with the slightest imps in its energy glimmer, the most inconspicuous mischief that made each conventional hit hire useless. Her systems, it seemed, anticipated every tactical maneuver the enemy's instruments could suggest, neutralizing them in turn. As skirmishes erupted around the vessel, it was clear its propulsion system was its greatest asset. This ship flowed through the battlefield with an almost living awareness rather than the regimented paths and boring maneuvers of ordinary spacecraft. It zipped through energy blasts and weaved past missile salvos, its energy-based thrusters driving it into the angles that let it strike at the enemy's weaknesses before retreating again into the shadow of the cosmos. This mobility not only perplexed the counterforces, but also obliged them to adopt a defensive orientation, struggling to adjust their strategies on the fly. But the real wonder was the ship's weaponry, a system which opened up and plundered the very depths of quantum energy. Its beams of concentrated force, unleashed, rewrote the rules of the battlefield, evaporating armor and piercing shields with a single, devastating blow. Its every vivid explication was designed for maximum ruin, and a field of disorder was right behind it. Special squads, equipped with the latest firepower that even their respective forces could kill classified documents, could not compete with a ship of war that had some of the best energy weapons a power could have. In one encounter, a battalion that had prided itself on nearly invincible defense lay in scattered wreckage within minutes. A story of the ship's overwhelming offensive capabilities. Peering from the rival empires, the Watchers appraised in horror and disbelief. These superpowers had dismissed humanity for decades as a primitive, resource-bereft civilization incapable of great technological breakthroughs. Now this very idea was being turned on its head in real time. The adaptive shielding and cutting-edge propulsion system weren't mere happy accidents of cobbled-together junk. They were painstaking labors of ingenuity and sheer will. The engineers had not merely made an old warship operational. They had resurrected it, combining defunct technologies with raw new ideas to which even the most advanced of races hadn't dreamed about. Enemy fleets tried coordinated strikes in the middle of the turmoil. Battleships fired volleys of torpedoes and lasers to pin down the elusive vessel. But each time, a response almost out of time itself. A flare of energy rendering those projectiles coming toward it useless, or catapulting them harmlessly into nothingness. The fighting became a sort of deadly chess game, each side anticipating how the other might respond in an always escalating war of wits and firepower. Decked out in scrap, birthed from contempt, the organic vessel had anointed the rhythm of the confrontation, forcing its enemies to re-examine every belief they had formed on technological dominance and military tactics. The ship's mystique deepened with each encounter. Its power to adapt, to survive, to retaliate transformed it into an embodiment of capricious might, a living rebuttal to the derisive epithets previously heaped upon human beings. The new threats of its quantum weaponry and the artful turns of battle with the alien craft ravaged the established order, exposing the mightiest empires of the galaxy to jar and tumble to find answers in a confrontation still far from complete. As the warship lauded overcame everything in its path, the galaxy's elite powers rushed to produce any solution that might compel submission from a seemingly insatiable force. Emergency sessions were held in high command chambers across empires as screens across the galaxy lit up with a live feed of the battle's chaos. The confident stratagems, developed over centuries of warfare, became impotent before an opponent that evolved with every blow. The coordinated push to neutralize the threat only widened the gap between expectation and reality. On the far side of the battlefield, the foe's fleets, hoping that mass might offset technological inferiority, launched 100 attacks at once. Heavily armed capital ships, flagship vehicles bearing the insignia of interstellar might, converged for what was meant to be a decisive blow. But time after time, the human warship countered every formation with a mix of unconventional tactics and calculated precision. It slipped between enemy lines, taking advantage of holes in the fleet's defenses with astonishing fearlessness. It took the opposing forces by storm with evasive twists and surprise bursts of speed, leaving their predictability in the dust. Reports started emerging, though, of advanced tactical units, specialized for neutralization of high-value targets, being dispatched from the command hubs of alien empires, tensions ratcheting up. Equipped with the newest stealth technologies and advanced targeting algorithms, these units were crafted to be the definitive solution to the warship's erratic conduct. Their emergence signaled that the stakes had suddenly risen dramatically. This was no longer a simple skirmish. It was now a full-scale war for the possession of fate. The warship was caught by the flanking action of a specialized fleet, trapped in a narrow channel among the rock formations of an asteroid field, a natural maze of stone and shadow that could be cover or a net. The human vessel glided effortlessly through the brackish, choking atmosphere, swerving cleanly around towering spires of stone and tangled vines, in a way that should not have been familiar yet, but somehow was. Enemy forces attempted to use the asteroids as cover while coordinating their fire to cover all angles at once. But each volley was intercepted by the warship's ever-adaptive countermeasures. Energy barriers erupted into being, absorbing the concentrated fire before responding with the swift, bloody release of precision bursts. As the conflict intensified, the tone in the galaxy switched from disdainful amusement to stark, existential dread. Accounts of the warship's feats flooded the interstellar media, and even the most stalwart of commanding officers began to suspect the infallibility of their own technologies. The ship's performance in the asteroid field was a watershed moment, a metaphor for the beyond bounds and flexible nature of human ingenuity. Each tactical move was analyzed by military analysts, who tried to fit the new data into long-held assumptions about warfare and strategy. Still, cracks started to form in the alliance of advanced empires, despite the fierce enemy tactics. But with each new failure and crippling loss, an atmosphere of paranoia and dissent began to form within the ranks. The human warship wasn't just a technological wonder. It was a sign of the future, when the underdog could be the one to rise up, armed with will and just enough ingenuity to take down the old order. Others, holding to traditional practices and precedents, urged radical, even desperate, actions, a step that risked renewed fighting. In the heat of this burgeoning crisis, the warship itself appeared to take on an aura of myth and legend, a ghostly force that confounded all rational predictions. That it existed at all was a provocation, a declaration that power and innovation need not be for or even conform to the established pecking order of the cosmos. The enemy fleets, battered from one failed tactical engagement after another, started retreating into the shadows, their plans in shambles. The great, united strength of the galaxy's superpowers had been fractured in a heartbeat by a lone, unyielding foe who broke tradition with every move she made, redefining the rules of combat with her every contact. In the midst of the chaos of war, the crew of the human warship, driven by an intense desire to win, scrutinized every incoming menace with cool determination. The years of neglect, the years of hardship, etched deep into their gaze, now softened by the flames of vindication. They had transformed what was supposed to be a last insult into a tool of brutal revenge. And as the sound of roiling energies and broken dreams filled the silence around, a single truth grew ever more evident. The Scrap, now the single most dangerous ship in the galaxy, was not just surviving, it was thriving. The human ship cut through the void of space like a heated knife through butter. Each precise maneuver tore enemy formations apart, swinging the balance of battle. It was a few things, but the tipping point came from a massive multidirectional confrontation near the splintered remains of a long-dead star system. The superpower, comfortable in its overwhelming power, launched a full-out attack with fleets arrayed like a wall of burning light. Their plan was straightforward: bombard the defiant scrap vessel with numbers and firepower. But the warship's true potential was exposed as the assault continued. This latest vessel, crafted from the finest elements of human day-to-day desperation, advanced a series of aggressive, yet all too cautious maneuvers which very much left the enemy with a string of look-alike demeanors. It flitted between the fray, its adaptive shields glowing against the devastation as they absorbed and redirected the manic energy of the attack. In their hearts, the stars would be born, searing through the hatred of the Xenos hordes and the waves of enemy ships that broke against them with each beat. Fired at them through the heat of the battle, the vessel's maneuvers emerged as a masterclass in guerrilla tactics, a mix of audacious risk and daring invention that turned traditional playbook on its head. Enemy commanders, who had previously mocked humanity's thresher, were now subjected to a painful reassessment of their tactics. Their flagship, a behemoth of a ship that could be taken as a literal representation of centuries of empire, was outmaneuvered, outgunned. At one point of electrifying action, the warship had exploited a critical opening in the enemy formation, unleashing a wave of energy strikes that rattled the opposing ranks. The consequences proved fatal. Reportedly invincible fleets began to splinter, losing cohesion under overwhelming fire. There was no gradual movement of the enemy. It became a panicked effort to conserve pride and regroup, while the human warship took advantage to pummel its saucer with metered accuracy. In the midst of the carnage, a palpable shift began in the hearts of friends and enemies alike. And for the human crew, every calculated risk and every arboreal act of defiance was a vindication of the potential others had previously dismissed. Constructed from the same detritus that had come to symbolize a lifetime of embarrassment, their ship had evolved into the very definition of an unstoppable force, a paradox of resilience and ingenuity. In the high-stakes atmosphere of combat, the ship's pilot, her cold, hard mind hidden behind distant eyes, made a desperate flank that cleaved the enemy's command structure. That decisive blow crushed the enemy's desire to carry on, their once mighty fleet in tatters. The battlefield shone bright with bursting raw energy, and the silent glimmers of adaptive shields as fortunes reversed dramatically. The unorthodox tactics and technological marvels of the warship have transformed what was to have been an overwhelming assault into a calamitous defeat for the ancient empires. Aspects of their legacy that had been viewed as ironclad for millennia were called into question by the bureaucrats in the galactic capital. The human warship roared its triumph across the stars, a clarion call learned in blood that no empire which underestimated its enemy would survive. In the aftermath of this decisive battle, the shattered enemy fleets withdrew into the black depths of the galaxy, chastened by their gross miscalculation. Their once fearsome banners now ripped in the empty air as tokens of a lost time. The news sent ripples through the galaxy as once oppressed worlds and systems found hope buried deep in the soil of their despair. Armed with a modicum of bitter irony, the once demeaned humanity had, through ingenuity and ineluctable resolve, found its moment of triumph that would perforce upset the balance of power in the cosmos. With the debris of the surviving forces laid to rest after the greatest conflict known to history, the galaxy knew a change. Humiliated and disregarded for a millennium, the human warship had become a symbol of the species' resiliency, a force that wouldn't die no matter how many existed to put it in a grave. A kind of sacred silence descended over the place, even as its crew navigated the still obvious ruins of conflict. Never before had the derided people carried a weapon so great that it made the most resolute of empires shudder in its path. The emotional payoff was rich and layered. Each crew member on board bore the weight of a collective victory, a victory conceived through tireless determination and ingenuity. Now their faces reflected a quiet pride and a sense of belonging, engraved by a life spent on the margins of society. And they had turned a wasteland scrap heap into a beacon of hope and defiance, a glittering reminder of what happened when resourcefulness won out over despair. Not only had their journey transformed military power, but it had also transformed themselves. No longer the pariahs of the cosmos, humanity had taken fate into its hands, making a cruel denigration a badge of sprawling superiority. Reaction, across the stars, was swift and seismic. Alien polities and generals, who'd long dismissed the abilities of Homo sapiens, called emergency meetings to reconsider the premises behind their planners. The knowledge that an abomination born out contempt could become the most potent war engine the galaxy had ever known reverberated through the most hallowed halls of power. Empires, nurtured for centuries in an intoxicating bubble of superiority and rigid tradition, were suddenly being forced to confront a devastating new truth. The game of war had been irreversibly changed. The human victory was not merely a military coup. It was a metaphysical insurgency, a challenge to the cosmic order that required examination as to what it meant to rule the universe. In public addresses and in behind-closed-doors meetings, the consequences were evident. The seemingly unbeatable powers shook as ex-comrades rattled sabers and whispered revolution, inspired by the idea that David can slay Goliath. The human warship had become a catalyst for a wider reordering of power, a beacon that inspired hope in those oppressed worlds and envy from those who clung to old regimes. The psychological toll was immense. An empire previously above criticism found themselves doubting their very tactics, their technology, and even the logic of ignoring an entire species as insignificant. Yet within this whirlwind of upheaval, the organic leadership of this human-led faction knew they had only just begun their journey. The win, despite its lawyerly dominance, came with the chilling responsibility of using their new power wisely. The high-stakes diplomatic maneuvers and strategic alliances that followed were necessary for the new leaders to map a stable, visionary order onto the hard-won success of their victory. They knew that this advantage came at a price: constant innovation, vigilance, and abiding by the principles that had turned them from scavengers into sovereigns. Yet, the true marvel, the only unanswerable question of this wild Ichabod proposal, resonated across the galaxy like a dream answered just beyond reach. If humans were capable of converting the elements of rust and refuse into the most destructive weapon forged against nature, what were the other potentials lying dormant in the decommissioned nooks and crannies of the cosmos? The astonishment of the revelation spread, creating awe and terror in equal measure. The elite, which now had to face a new paradigm, rushed to unlock secrets of technology and strategy that hadn't seemed worth seeking out. In a universe where even the most colossal of fleets and the most magnificent of technologies combined into a dizzying show of power, the ascension of this human masterpiece marked an extraordinary pivot point. A down-to-earth assertion that the index of power was less about resources and far more about the audacity, and wits to use them against the odds. Instead, at the cusp of destiny following their final triumphant stand, they found themselves throwing every expectation of ability out the window. Masters of the universe replaced insatiable hunters and scavengers. It was a wake-up moment for the galaxy. The narrator continues, but none as important as the lesson learned by the galactic forces with the human scrap warship. Never underestimate the human spirit, a mistake that would change the balance of power among the stars forever. The galaxy was left to fathom a new fate in the silence after the Titanic battles. The warship that had been previously broken down to nothing more than world scrap metal has become a key to the survival of the humanite. Long-held beliefs fell away where destinies were forged in the corridors of power. They were all mostly rivals, and some of them others enemies to their cores, but it was the dawning of a new era in their world where their definition of strength was evolving, not necessarily something determined by power or power of the ancients, but by the fierce drive to survive no matter what one had available to them to exploit. Throughout myriad star systems, civilians and warriors alike, long subjugated to the flippant dominion of forged empires, looked to the success of the human insurrection with hope. Propaganda that had scorned humanity's value and implied that every piece of refuse had the potential to be reduced to an elemental mineral was never spoken again. In distant outposts and busy spaceports, the whispers grew to claims. Humanity was no longer the hapless underdog, but rather a force to be reckoned with, a threat to the status quo that had mocked them for so long. Once unresponsive to human ambitions, diplomatic channels now buzzing with tentative overtures. Leaders of broken empires pursued conversation, eager to comprehend the alchemy that had turned a vestige of mockery into a tool of cosmic vengeance. In turn, this human leadership, confident from victory but wary of the realities of conflict, seized upon this opportunity as both success and an assignment to reinforce vigilance. They knew that every alliance, each treaty forged in the aftermath of this cataclysm, would determine the course of a galaxy in flux. In the sweeping saga of interstellar politics, the warship's legacy served as a point of contention for discussions of innovation, endurance, and the nature of warfare. And scholars and strategists from across the cosmos pored over its adaptive systems and unorthodox strategies, uncovering insights that would challenge military doctrine for generations. The mangled that had once represented humanity's impediments had become an emblem of what is possible now with heart and imagination, a lesson that would reverberate through the annals of the past. Even as the new era began, there was a discernible undercurrent of caution. The wrinkled powers that had once mocked the sinful little things had begun to regard each other with wariness, a strange turn of events if you would consider that nothing had really changed, yet everything had, they just weren't human. The memory of past hubris was held in every treaty signed and every defensive move made. The galaxy had learned a brutal lesson. There would be unexpected and devastating consequences for mockery and contempt. As for humanity, the path was only beginning. It was a reminder of their hard-won victory, a ship that could change destiny against the odds. The trials that awaited them were as threatening as they were certain, but the respect that had been gained on the field of war gave every man the belief that he could face them. And the scraps they had once been given had not just been turned into a devastating weapon. They had been turned into a testament of hope, new age ingenuity, and the unbending strength of humankind.